Unbelievable. China just hits back 75% tariffs on the USA. The U.S. China trade war just took a massive turn. China has retaliated against the United States with a jaw-dropping 75% tariff on key American goods. This move isn't just another trade dispute. It's an economic earthquake that could shake global markets, crush industries, and even impact you. But is this the final escalation before a full-blown economic war? And most importantly, who will come out on top?
Tariffs, tariffs, tariffs. One for Canada, one for Mexico, and yes, one for you, China. That's my attempt at Trump, okay? That's all I'm going to do for this one. Sorry about that. Trump has announced and has launched the tariffs that have been looming. 25% slap for everything coming in from Mexico, 25% for everything coming in from Canada, and 10% for everything coming in from China. So, is Trump, now that he's in the driving seat, about to switch gears and switch lanes, taking the fast lane on the motorway? Destination, American obscurity. One could argue his tariffs speed up the trend America was already on, the trajectory, rather, that America was already on. America's advanced economy slowing down in terms of growth, American businesses struggling to compete with international rivals, and as a result of the shifting geopolitics, America becoming obscure, basically, a smaller and smaller slice of the world economic pie. Now, this is not an overnight thing. It's not an instance. We're talking about the largest by some metrics and the second largest by other metrics economy in the whole world. So it's not like you're going to go from there to, a tiny economy overnight or even over a decade. But the trajectory that you're on is definitely a downwards trajectory. And Trump has, in many ways, arguably sped up the progress. Tariffs, in almost all circumstances, you see, slow down an economy when it's imposed by that economy on anything coming in. It slows down the economy and hampers growth, and businesses struggle against that type of protectionist, anti-profit, in many ways, nature of tariffs. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum immediately ordered retaliatory tariffs from Mexico to the US. She said, quote, "I have instructed my economy minister to implement the Plan B we've been working on, which includes tariffs and non-tariff measures in defense of Mexico's interests." End quote. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, announced retaliatory measures for the northern state as well, with 25% tariffs of their own on a selection of US imports, including beer, wine, and bourbon. I thought that's the same thing. Anyway, I don't know. I'm not an expert on alcohol. As well as, I think the Canadians announced over 150 different products that were being tariffed by the Canadian side, right? This is in response to America putting that 25% slap on everything Canadian. Also included in that list of Canadian stuff is not maple syrup, calm down, but fruits and fruit juices. That also sounds like the same thing. Not gonna lie. Anyway, including orange juice from Trump's home state in Florida. So there you have it. Trumpian orange juice now being taxed or tariffed. He said, Trudeau, that the coming weeks would be difficult for Canadians, but that Americans would also suffer from Trump's actions. Trudeau goes on to say that tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk. He's talking to Americans when he says that. He's talking to Americans and saying that tariffs will potentially shut down American auto assembly plants, car makers basically, and other manufacturing facilities. Why? Because, you might be thinking, okay, tariffs might be bad, but one thing that they promise to do essentially is ensure that domestic industry is given a chance to flourish, right? If tariffs make it harder for things to be brought in and still be profitable, then businesses might turn internally to American companies and import from them, basically, rather than import from the outside. So why are we talking about Americans losing their jobs? Well, because it's in the short term, it might be such a shock to some businesses to have those tariffs where the profit margins are already so small in some cases, reportedly, I don't know for sure, but in those cases, the tariffs might just shut down businesses. It might cause businesses to collapse rather than be able to reorient, to find alternatives, and and take the hit essentially without giving it up to the consumer. You have to remember, somebody has to pay for the tariffs. And that will mean the supply from the outside drops, the goods that are actually made in the US rise in price, and then a rise in price of goods often mean that less people can afford to buy them and less people are willing to buy them. If less people are willing to buy them, that's just your business is just doing worse now. Okay, you're selling less stuff, you're making less profit. Which is why tariffs are so bad for growth compared to a free market economy, which America was happy with all these years. But now that it's no longer in the lead in many ways, it says, no, actually, hang on, we kind of don't like this free market thing going on. Anyway, Trudeau said what he said during a news conference in Ottawa. Now, I just want to touch on the U.S. Canada relationship. It's a huge one. They're two advanced economies, both in the Western world, America being literally the largest economy in the world or the second largest by some other metrics. $2.5 billion of trade every day occurs between Canada and the United States. That's a huge amount of trade, and that's what Trump is putting on the line, essentially, in order to advance his preferences. The preferences that he thinks will be beneficial for America. He thinks this is putting America first. Fine, we'll have to see. Things like this take time. The knock-on effects are huge, and you won't know until months or years even down the line how this has actually affected the American economy. If tariffs do benefit the Americans and benefit domestic production, who does it benefit? It won't benefit everyone. Some people will be struggling. Some people's livelihoods essentially will be sacrificed on the altar of whatever progress that Trump hopes this will make for the American state. So it's tariffs, which mean it will definitely slow down a country's growth. Let's see what will come about as a result of that on the other side. Because there are benefits to tariffs. It's a protection mechanism that encourages and supports domestic production, and everything you would otherwise import from outside countries, you build or you produce yourself, which means new businesses, bringing manufacturing back to America. All the talking points basically are activated at that point. So it remains to be seen whether or not Trump's tariffs are a good thing. Another Canadian official described Trump's tariffs as, quote, a complete betrayal of the historic bond between our countries and a declaration of economic war against a trusted ally, end quote. Not very nice words, of course. Another official said, Canada has no choice now but to hit back and hit back hard. And finally, China. We have to talk about China, right? Sorry about that second Trump impression. I know I had disappointed you guys already once during this video, and I did it again. Apologies. Anyway, China's finance and commerce ministries denounced Trump's decision while leaving the door open for talks to avoid deepening the conflict, i.e. basically making a bad decision worse, in their opinion. The ministries said Beijing will challenge the decision before the World Trade Organization and take unspecified countermeasures. So China's complaining, basically, which is not surprising because America is a huge, wealthy market for Chinese manufacturers. Everything you see that says made in China, of course, China is benefiting, right? They've got factories producing the stuff. They've got people working at those factories. They've got those businesses making a profit from selling all the stuff to America. And America benefits as well. This was a deal, basically, that was made. You make the cheap stuff. We buy the cheap stuff. Now the thing is, Trump wants America to take back manufacturing to a large extent or to some extent. And tariffs are going to be the only way because you can't compete with the Chinese on that scale. It's, the wages there are lower, the factories are bigger, they've had 40, 50 years, or at least 30 to 40 years of experience in mass production and supply chain standardization and optimization, which means they can just make everything for so affordable. You can't match that with American wages, American regulation, and American inflated price of goods because of their service industry, and Silicon Valley is just absolutely nuts in terms of its overvaluation. You can't compete. So tariffs are a good way. If you slap 100, 200%, however many 100% you want on China, you shut down the supply coming from China, then Americans are basically forced to make the stuff themselves at great cost and effort, obviously, to American businesses. But Trump is looking like he's willing to bite that bullet and take the hit and, force it through. Anyway, time will tell.
Over the past few years, the US and China have been locked in a brutal trade war. It all started when Washington accused Beijing of unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and currency manipulation. The US responded with tariffs, taxes on Chinese imports, aiming to pressure China into changing its policies. China, of course, didn't sit quietly. It retaliated with its own tariffs, but this latest move, a game changer. China just announced a 75% tariff on select American goods, targeting industries that are the backbone of the US economy. Cut to visuals. List of affected US industries appearing on screen. Agriculture. US farmers are already struggling, and now their exports to China are about to plummet. Automobiles. American car manufacturers could see their sales in China collapse. Technology. China is hitting back at the semiconductor industry, a sector already under pressure from US sanctions. This isn't just a trade dispute anymore. This is a direct economic counterattack by Beijing. Now you might be wondering, why 75%? Why such a massive tariff hike? Well, this is where things get interesting. China is playing a high-stakes game of economic chess. First, China is targeting sectors that are highly dependent on the Chinese market. For example, the US exports billions in soybeans and aircraft parts to China. A 75% tariff means those exports become ridiculously expensive, pushing Chinese buyers to switch to other markets like Brazil and Europe. Second, China is betting that US companies will put pressure on Washington to ease tensions. With major industries hurting, corporate America might lobby for negotiations or even force a shift in US policy. Third, this could be a warning shot before China takes even bigger actions, like restricting exports of rare earth minerals essential for US tech and defense industries. And if that happens, the consequences could be devastating for American companies. So how will the US respond? Will Washington back down, or will this lead to a full-scale economic war? Here are three possible scenarios. 1. Escalation. The US could respond by raising tariffs on even more Chinese goods, tightening restrictions on Chinese tech companies like Huawei, or even freezing Chinese assets in the US. 2. Retaliation through alliances. Washington might try to rally allies like the European Union, Japan, and India to coordinate a joint trade offensive against China. 3. Negotiation and de-escalation. Some experts believe that both sides don't actually want a total economic war, and that back-channel diplomacy is already happening. Could this be the breaking point that forces a truce? The stakes couldn't be higher, and whatever happens next will have global consequences. So what does all of this mean for you? Rising prices. A full-blown trade war means inflation could skyrocket, making everything from electronics to food more expensive. Job losses. If industries like agriculture and manufacturing take a hit, expect layoffs and economic uncertainty. Stock market volatility. The markets hate instability, and this trade war could trigger major fluctuations, impacting your investments and retirement savings. This trade war isn't just about tariffs, it's about power, influence, and the future of the global economy. Will the US and China find a way to negotiate, or are we headed for a full-scale economic showdown? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think China's move was justified, and how should the US respond? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our deep dives into global events.